Welcome to Sierra Ventures CXO Insights on AI. My name is Mark Fernandez. I'm a managing partner here at Sierra. Our guest today is Sunil Cutinho, the Chief Information Officer at CME Group, one of the largest financial institutions that you've probably not heard about. Welcome, Sunil.
Well, thank you very much, Mark.
Sunil, could you give us some color on CME and kind of your organization there?
CME Group, it's a 180-year-old institution with several exchanges and marketplaces. Many wouldn't have heard about it, but if you go back in history, you would have heard of the Chicago Board of Trade, very, very famous. To make it simple for all our listeners, I'll just say that CME is the world's largest financial and commodity marketplace. It's where all our investors come to manage risk across multiple asset classes. And they manage risk by trading on our markets, whether it's treasuries, US dollar interest rates, FX, or equities. CME is the place they come to. Most recently, oil is in the news. So, with crude oil prices moving up and down, then you see those prices are coming from our markets. The entire world comes to our markets to actually hedge risks. In this case, it's related to geopolitical events. I lead the technology organization for CME. I've been with CME for 23 years. I fell in love with it when I was first brought in on the operations side of the company. I have a technology pedigree, but they did not have a role for me, and I did not know anything about futures and options. So they take me on a walk to the trading floor. In those days, most of the trading used to happen on the floor. And I fell in love because in a very, very short time period, when there is news about interest rates that comes out, which is typically in the form of FOMC actions at 1 p.m. Chicago time. And, the feeling is electric. Sometimes you're surprised that people can trade billions of dollars in such a short amount of time, and they can keep track of prices moving. These days, it's a lot of electronic trading and a lot of algorithms. But the business is still the same: managing risk, protecting yourselves from volatility in the market, or hedging yourself if you have a physical position. So that's CME. One of the best things I can tell people is, before you become a CIO, if you ever aspire to become a CIO, the best thing to do is to understand the business inside out. So the role of a CIO is changing. You must understand the business, and you must understand how technology can take your business to the next level. So that's a little about CME and me.
Thank you, Sunil. And so where are you in your AI journey? This is meant to be about AI. And so where are you in your AI journey? Could you give us some specific examples of how AI has helped you and maybe some places where it hasn't yet worked?
Okay, so, we are not as further along as a lot of the technology companies in Silicon Valley. So I wouldn't say we are an AI first company yet. Okay, we have gone past the experimenting stage. We use AI in two places. At a highest level, I would call it internal productivity. So think about, generative AI embedded into our, teamwork, collaboration, office automation space. We use Google Workspace. So whatever is embedded in there, we use it to the fullest extent, and our teams are using it a lot. Another type of productivity is engineering, software engineering. And so our teams are actually using it. We've rolled it out to the entire team. So we use it for not just, coding, which is where most of the focus is, but it's a lot of the pre-coding effort. It's proving to be extremely valuable in taking, what is expressed in, let's say, a vision, or sometimes in a one sentence epic. It can take that and, write a very detailed requirements document, or an epic or a story or a feature. And that's taking us almost 80 to 90% of the way. So that's where I think the magic is. The other places we are looking at is the entire software development lifecycle, and looking at agents to help us automate that entire flow. With, of course, humans in the loop to look at, especially the artifact that is generated with a critical view. But most of the other stuff, like pull requests, merging on, all of that will be handled by the agent. So that's where we are in our journey. So that's on the productivity side. So in terms of, uh, value to the customer, end customer, we are looking at agents to help, our trading simulator clients. So we offer a trading simulator on CME Group. And there, as traders come in, these are designed, they're targeted towards novices who are new to futures, options, and also our other cash markets, but they're just learning trading. And typical target end users are, those who are taking a finance course at a university. So we provide an agent in that simulation module. So that's our first attempt at it, which will go at, all of our rules, regulations, all the rules under, capital markets, along with our own compliance, um, rules, and it will guide a trader as they are trading. So you're learning not just trading, but you're learning to trade, without violating any of the laws or the rules that are out there. So there's a lot of promise there. We think a lot can be done in that area. So those are two things that are live and functioning. There are others on the way. So our target areas are operations. We want to look at agentic operations, always on agents that can help us with 24/7 continuous operations. We are looking at agents that can look at our data repository and provide insights to our internal business customers. And if we can perfect the agent, we will make it available to our external customers. So those are things that are down, on the roadmap. But this is where we are. So I wouldn't say we have done nothing. I wouldn't say we are leaders. We are fast followers.
Sunil, do you think we're setting the right expectations for AI's impact inside large enterprises, both in the near and midterm?
Well, when it comes to, the C-suite of a business, where, it's important to start with that, use cases where it's easy to prove impact, okay, for any proposed AI solution. We were coming through a period where all of us were focused on capabilities that are out there publicly, transparently. So they are sometimes available through our own private lives, and sometimes they are publicly announced. But the best way for us, for businesses like ours, to actually explore AI, as it turns out, is by identifying some use cases that are less risky, okay, conservative use cases where we can actually prove the impact. We need a good, effective proving ground, and then we tend to take it to the next level. So we slowly increase the exposure that we are willing to take on once we prove that the capability really is impactful. So this process will take time, and it may not apply to every enterprise business, but at least for our kind of business, that's the approach we're taking.
So do you think that this has been harder than expected, either the technology, the data, or organizational change? What do you think's been the hardest part?
I'm trying to think where to start. So there are three aspects to it. So I'll use the framework of people, process, and systems. If we start from the systems dimension, it's a recipe for failure. So that's why it is hard. The hardest part is that we have to start with the mindset of the people. So we need to start from the people side. It's not simply, creating an organization that is, at least our approach is not to create an organization that is dedicated on AI and then expect that team to go and completely reimagine our world. That has not worked very well for us in every kind of transformation. So the most recent transformation we've done, in the most recent transformation we've done, we started with our people, painting a very clear vision on what we're trying to achieve, um, and putting in place leaders and teams that have embraced that vision. So that comes first, and then leave it to those teams to actually reimagine the processes. Okay. And then they will reimagine the systems or the systems necessary to achieve the outcomes. So we in the C suite have to come up with good outcomes. What is the outcome we are seeking? Then have leaders who have embraced and internalized that outcome, and then they will do the rest. So that, I believe, is so that part is the hardest. The hardest part is clarity of thought from the top and building a good leadership across your entire enterprise, not creating a siloed team. The second part, when it comes to systems, is having a good, clean, single golden source of data. Because if you don't have that, any technology that you apply using AI is ineffective because it learns based on a corpus of information. And if you have duplicate information, if you have them incorrect information, if they are completely decentralized, it gets very complex very fast. So those are the things we had done very early on. And we started this journey in 2022. And we are just complete. We'd finished most of our data platform in the first 2 years. We transformed most of our non-ultra low latency systems, and now we are at the doorstep of ultra low latency systems. So it took us that long to actually rethink and reimagine our platform. And now I would say the technology actually, helps us in a big way. We can accelerate on top of that. So I feel that transformation is the hardest part, and it needs to come from the top.
That's very insightful. So I know you're a good partner for Google, right? You built a lot of your architecture around that. How do you think about build versus buy versus partner? And given that I'm in the venture capital business, what advice would you give to startups as they're looking to work with organizations like yours?
I will answer with respect to our organization. So build and buy is not a very easy decision, but let me explain what goes into those decisions. First, if we are building a capability that is necessary for us to differentiate ourselves from other platforms, we will build it ourselves. We are less likely to use a packaged software or to delegate that to another firm to build it for us. So it's mostly a build decision versus a buy decision there. And that, we believe, gives us sustainable competitive advantage, greater control, and greater ways to customize it with unique information, unique capabilities, so we can stand apart. But there are a lot of things that we do that do not give us. It is not necessary for us to have a competitive differentiator. We think these are, for lack of a better word, I would say, services where we are a taker. We are willing to take what is available in the market as long as it's supported very well. So that's a good buy decision. So that's one dimension between build and buy. The second thing is when we are exploring a buy decision, the most important thing for enterprises of our nature is um, you know not just information security protections but also privacy. Okay, so we do not like sending our information outside our you know virtual private cloud. So we wouldn't do that. We'd like to keep our information internal to us. So to the extent that to the extent that we would buy a service, we would want it to work within our virtual private cloud, where we are not sending information out, but the capability runs within our platform with our controls, because we've spent a lot of time to mature and build the current set of controls, and they are still evolving. Um, and we don't want to expose, we don't want to break and create another vector, okay, through another partner. Those get very, very complex and difficult. So to the extent that we are buying something, it must run within our platform with our standard set of controls.
So, if you were starting from scratch today, Sunil, what part of the stack, enterprise technology stack, would you redesign first because of AI? How would you think about things differently here?
Generally speaking, the data layer, single standard data layer where you're doing less of extraction, transformation, load to move data from one place to another. That's where I would focus on building a single data foundation where you can seamlessly go from an operational data store to an analytical data store without moving data. That single data platform is the foundation, I would say. The next foundational level I would think of, building blocks is, you know, um, a decomposable architecture. So we came upon cloud far later in our maturity. So we would start with we would be cloud native. If we were to start from scratch, it would be cloud native. And to the greatest extent possible, we would use a microservices architecture with, built on top of, an application so that different components of it can be available through APIs. Once you have those two pieces, then it's very easy to build different type of agents. You will get the flexibility you will get by composing different set of services is very, very high. And the reason I talk about it is I believe for success, you need two things, sorry, I would say three things. Let me think through that. First one is stability and our ability to make changes continuously without impacting our customers. Second, I would say is simplicity. Third, I would say is extensibility, your ability to adapt. So even with agentic AI, if you don't have the ability to adapt, the agents you build today may have to change significantly tomorrow. How difficult is it for you to completely do away with some set of agents and replace it with another without impacting your end user? Those are the kinds of questions that come to me, and I'll have to design for that, right? So if I was designing from scratch, a single data layer, a composable architecture with microservices, and then an agentic layer on top of that. That's how I would think of services if I were to build from scratch.
That's great. Sunil, let's end on a personal note. So both of us have college-age kids.
Mm.
This is a tough. The environment's changing so rapidly. What advice would
Mm.
you give, college graduates right now?
The advice I would give them is to adapt. They must learn both the business side and technology side. Is no longer sufficient to be a subject matter or a skills expert. And during our time when we were graduating, we would pick, engineering, we would pick electrical engineering or computer science engineering, and we would further specialize in a specific area there. I think that will go away very quickly because, the need for, broader skills, right, will increase. Depth will be solved to some extent with AI, I feel. So without knowing, so the most important piece in an agentic world or an AI-driven world is to understand the business problem. So what problems is society, what problems are people in society facing? What problems are businesses in society facing? So understanding the problem very clearly, understanding what solution actually fits that problem is more important than the technical specifics of which database you're going to use, which language you're going to use, which operating system you're going to use. If you've learned anything from the last, let's say, 2 decades, technology goes obsolete very quickly. So anything that is very, very specific will become practically useless 10 years from now. So
Thank you, Sunil. This has been super helpful. I'm sure your peers, the startup founders that we work with, all going to find this very helpful. And good luck in this age of AI. Things are moving really quickly.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for having me. I hope your viewers enjoy our talk.
Thank you, Sunil.
Cheers. Bye-bye.